Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bero. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you at the first of two press conferences devoted to the Films and Tiger competition. Let's meet the filmmakers. Let's discuss their films. We're live. You can follow us. You can Twitter. You can ask questions from the room. And afterwards, the Tiger competition, as you know, is the main competition of the festival, where we try to give space to filmmakers that rattle us, confuse us, and do something nice with cinema we have not seen before, challenge our views, and expand the horizon of cinema. Let's start with the jury. We have 5 people in the jury. Emily, you may know from Vision du Ruel. Festival director. Hafiz Rankanyale is a member of the collective that was first appointed to curate the Documenta in Kassel. We're very happy that he's here. Hani Abu Assad, a Palestinian filmmaker and a friend, 2 Oscar nominations, he's here. Kogo Nara had a film in Tiger competition a couple years ago. You may have seen it, Columbus. And finally, Sasha Polak, the director of last year's opening film, Dirty God. Here they are. They will have the challenge and the pleasure to watch those 10 films. We had 8 previous years, but this year I could not say no to those 10 brilliant films. So let's go through them one by one. We go through them chronologically. We'll ask the directors to come on stage and have a little chat with them. The first one, these are the 5 ones all together. We have a second press conference on Tuesday. These are the directors. Let's start on Thursday. We opened the competition with a film called Drama Girl from the Netherlands. Director is Vincent Boy Kars. Let's take a look at a clip.
Oké, Leila, je vader is inmiddels overleden en hij ligt opgebaard in zijn atelier. En in deze scène wil ik je vragen om in een geïmproviseerde monoloog afscheid van hem te nemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the director of Drama Girl, Vincent Boy Kars.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi. First, you had the concept of making a documentary film about making a film in which the protagonist is reenacting key events out of his or her life, in this case her. And then you had to go and find the protagonist. How did you find Leila de Monk? And what was it about her story that appealed to you?
The most important thing is that I could relate on a personal level with her because we both lost our fathers recently, 5 years ago, and Leila 2 years ago now. And in the same time, we broke up with our relationship, so we had a lot. And at the other hand, she was not an actress, but she's a performer. And I thought it would be nice to work with a non-actress, but she was used to, tell stories with her body as a dancer. And now in this film, she was also like with, acting.
You mentioned, or I mentioned, key events. The clip you showed was Leila taking a basically saying goodbye to her father, and then later on in the film, the father revisits also Leila, and this obviously didn't happen. What was the reason to put that also in the film?
Yeah, I thought it would be nice to give her father a voice from heaven, because in my life, like, I feel my father is up there watching me, and I wish I could talk to him, right? So I thought it would be nice for her to experience with a father coming back to Earth and tell her he loves her.
The film is an experiment. It investigates the boundaries between reality and fiction. It questions where does filmmaking or storytelling begin and where does reality end. Did you find answer to that question?
No, for me it's even more complex than when I started. Because I don't know what I made. I just describe it as a film, but there are so many layers, and I need more time to to watch to my own movie and have a little distance on it, and maybe like then I can answer that question. But I'm still processing it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Vincent.
Thank you. So Vincent Boykars, if you haven't seen Drama Girl, it's playing a couple more times. A hybrid, an experiment, but first of all, great cinema. Stay seated. Next up is the film we premiered from Venezuela, La Fortaleza, second film by Jorge Tilenamo, who has been, I think, on a quite extensive journey, on a personal journey with his father to find what makes men tick, I guess. Let's find out by watching a little clip first. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the director of La Fortaleza, Jorge Tilenamo.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jorge. Please tell us a little bit about the film, about La Fortaleza.
La Fortaleza is a film that I made with my father. He plays a version of himself as he leaves the city in Caracas, which is exploding with protest, and he goes to the jungle to rebuild this lodge, abandoned tourist lodge, and to rebuild himself, to quit drinking. And in the jungle, he battles his demons, but also meets old friends that are working in illegal gold mining, and that takes him down a path of violence and corruption.
You said that you wanted to make this film or you see this film also as an attempt to make a family album. Could you elaborate on that?
One of my most primal, let's say, intentions with making this film is to immortalize the image of my father, to protect something that I feel that is leaving me. I left Venezuela when I was 15 years old, and making these films has been a way to go back, to return. And I returned to a country that every time I can no longer recognize it anymore. And I don't feel that I'm from there. And I don't feel that I'm from where I live now. So in a way, with this second film, I am creating like an archive of a memory that is mine, that is very personal, that I can always refer to later in case I forget.
your father, who is playing a version of himself, Jorge Roquetilen, he's also here, sitting in front. How was it to work with him? How did you direct him? Because he's a non-actor.
And your dad.
And he's your dad, exactly, yeah.
It was quite a trip.
I can imagine.
It was a little bit of improvisation, a little bit of an experiment. My father, we had a screenplay, but he never read the script. I always kept the script from him, and every day, right before shooting, we would talk about the scene. No, he wouldn't learn any lines. Rather, he would say what is in the script in his own words. And sometimes with the other characters in the film, who are all non-professional actors, I would give some of them different information. And of course, I worked with an acting coach many months before to train the non-professional actors to exist within the parameters of a camera, to react, not necessarily to act. Yeah, it was a lot. It was one of the most intense things I've done in my life.
You see it a bit on the screen also, the intensity of the father, especially. Thank you very much, Jorge
Hold on one
Tilinarma.
second, I got one more question, because how did you convince the producers to say, I got this film, it's very personal, we'll go to the jungle, it's the real gold miners, it'll be dangerous, and good news, I'm casting my father. What was the trick? Why did they say yes?
I guess I just have the charm, I don't know.
You have to ask them, maybe.
No, it was very difficult, you know. We reached a lot of semifinals, let's say pre-selections, and always it was, well, we don't think you can, it's very risky to make a film with your father, no? So that was a lot of the thing. But luckily, my first film was also with non-professional actors, and my father also starred in it, even though it was a minor role. So I had some backup, and I had some people that believed in me, and little by little, you know, that's contagious.
Well, I guess it worked because you're in Tiger competition, my friend. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, just premiered it last night, a very powerful film from Brazil. To be honest, I think it was the first film that we selected after I seen it in summer, and I was blown away by it. Something that radiates power of femininity and loss in a way I have never seen. I hope you feel the same way. Let's take a little look at what it looked like.
Ainda está viajando.
Ah, férias da família. Às vezes é preciso, não é? Diz até que melhora o romance. São 42,50. Boa noite, Israel. Dá um beijo no Lucas.
Ladies and gentlemen, please say hi to a very powerful director from Brazil, Maria Clara Escobar.
Welcome. Thank you. Can you describe in your own words what the stir is about?
I believe it comes from different sources, trying to explain what it's about. But I believe that the choice of keeping the word in Portuguese is because in Brazil is about a feeling of don't having land or don't having a place. And also, I believe it's about going on and not having where to come back. So not having place and feeling it, this nowhere to come back or nowhere to go or nowhere to belong to.
The clip we have seen, Otto Jr. is here, who's playing Israel, and Barbara Collen is here as well. The clip you have shown is where we see Israel running, Otto Jr. But to me, there is, in the first 2/3 of the film, it's divided in 3 chapters, there's a theme of immobility, of apathy in a way. Could you explain why? And then we see him run.
Yes. I wanted to talk about one thing that I call a tradition from a certain class in Brazil, which is not getting into conflict and believing that once you don't face the things will not happen or they will not exist, but I believe they actually exist. And I believe that once we get conscious of that, or talk about the issues we have to, like death or loss, but our own postures every day, we'll be better persons and better politics. And so that's why they are practic, because I believe this kind of way of doing family and dealing with things or not dealing with things, it's already, I don't know, old, it's already dying, or we're not seeing it, not facing it, that we should change our ways of being people and thinking the world.
The last part of the film, there's a movement, there's also basically mainly women, and Barbara Collen, who also has a very powerful scene, reciting a poem from the 19th century about women and how women are perceived in literature or in society. So I feel that the place of the women or portrayal of women is also a very important theme in your film, but
Yes.
you don't mention it.
No,
You
it is.
just did.
I believe we come, the beginning of the film, the idea of the film is what I'm talking about. And then what we discovered together doing this film was, and what we desire in the end, which is the third part, is so how can we make our own discourse? How can we feel represented? And how do we construct this idea of a woman in movement? Because we feel, and I think we shared this feeling, that women are always represented as a fixed thing. How to say this? Still thing. Static. Yeah. So we were trying also to understand or investigate how could we be representing movement? How would be this image or the words? So this is it's where the film goes to, I think.
To the end.
Yeah.
And the monologues of the women, did you write them? Because I feel that sometimes it also feels like, I don't know, they're very powerful. They come from a very real place.
We as a team, we work together, everyone in different experience, but I've been working with the main character, for example, for 3 years. We had the cine club at my house, and we used to discuss films. So everything was made together in a way. The monologues specifically, I provoked them, the 3 actors, with some questions and things, and asked them to write something. And they wrote in different ways. Barbara more organized, Isabel more crazily. And I'll get their texts or their ideas and transform into actually a monologue. So we made together.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria Clara Escobar.
Next up is I think the longest entry we've ever had in Tiger competition. Words like epic are very appropriate here. It's a film that relates back to '92 when we were looking at Spain in awe because there was a Olympic Games and the Expo in Seville was going on. But at the same time, something else was going on in Cartagena, which has total relevance today, and the workers' movement in general. 200 minutes of the year of discovery. Let's take a look.
No, guardar. Se ha dicho que puede invitar a cubatas al barril de cerveza que hay.
¿A que nos va a invitar? ¿Pero es tu cumple o algo?
Hombre, yo mañana curro, sí, en algún momento tenemos que ir aquí.
Como si fuera un cigarro tampoco. Venga. Que disimula.
Nacho, Pablo. ¿Tú quieres una copa? ¿Tú quieres una copa? Sí, tío. Pablo, escúchate esta canción.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the director, Luis Lopez Carrasco.
Welcome, Luis. For you also, the same question. Could you please tell us about your film, El Año del Descubrimiento?
The film is really connected to my first film, my first feature, El Futuro, which was the reenactment of a party in 1982. A party of young people, and it was a kind of fake found footage of a moment in Spanish history that 1982 is the moment when you can feel the transition from dictatorship to democracy is more or less finished. And then I have the feeling that I have to look back to that period again in a completely completely different point of view. Because the El Futuro was about middle class, was about Madrid, was about the usual storytellings about the 80s in Spain as a moment of freedom and celebration. But at the same time, I needed to, speaking about the 80s, about also a decade of a lot of conflict. So, and one of the main conflicts was the industrial crisis, the deindustrialization of the country. And then I remember that when I was 11, one day I was looking at the TV and the parliament of my region was burning because the workers were fighting against the police and because all the closures of the factories. And the citizenship was so desperate that in the end they burned a parliament in a democracy which was only 14 years old. So it's like interesting because I remember that because my hometown is Murcia and Cartagena is the second town of this region. It's interesting because it's the same year that the Olympic Games are going held, the Expo de Sevilla, the Universal Exhibition is going held, and when I asked my parents in Murcia, my grandparents were living in the 80s in Cartagena, what happened in 1992? Why the people burned the parliament? I mean, we were a newborn democracy and we were going to protect the institution, not burning them. My parents thought that I was inventing it because they didn't remember it at all. That never happened. So if some people are forgetting this, it's a good reason to make a movie about it.
Definitely. And the way you are telling the story is basically by collecting a total of 44, I believe you told me yesterday, people in a bar and registering their conversations in a split screen. Why the bar and why the split screen?
The point is that Raúl Liarte and me, Raúl is a screenwriter and he is the son of one of the workers of the shipyard in Cartagena, started to research and to interview all the original people that participate in the events. And then we started we made an open casting about current workers and unemployed people because the idea of the film is connecting the crisis of 1992 with the crisis of 2008 because it's still going on in Spain and in many European countries. So in the open casting we find so many people because we found so many stories because the original idea was doing a reenactment, but in the end we decided that these people should tell us their stories. In the end, the film became a collective portrait of the working class neighborhoods of Cartagena and La Unión. And I thought that gathering everybody in a cafeteria is a good place I wanted the film to have the experience of when you are in a cafeteria listening to different conversations. So this idea of collective portrait that at the beginning you don't know if you're in the 90s or you are in the current times. I didn't have budget to do a period time in the exteriors. So you have to do this image of the 1992 in a... But I'd like to have this claustrophobic idea of a social class that has been kidnapped into a very small place. So it's part of the film. And in addition, I knew that the film was going to be only close-ups in this bar. And in addition, the assistant editor put all the footage in double screen, and then the editor and me, from the very first moment, decided that the film would be split screen. That was very, very complicated, but we thought that this immersion inside the cafeteria, this space expanded of listening to one and then looking to the other place and then traveling on these storytellings was interesting to also experiment with the possibilities of split screen.
Okay, thank you.
So we think it's an epic work. Was there a moment where you thought 60 minutes is enough? No, there's a length to it that is relevant to being incorporated in that setting and to have that clash between the generation of then and now. Could this have been even longer?
The idea was that could be even longer because what the film is in the end is this collective portrait from the end of the Civil War, 1939, to the current times. It's a kind of wide panoramic of what happened to working class people in the last 80 years. And there were going to be 4 chapters, a 5-hour film, because we were going to tell from the First Republic, who ended in Cartagena in 1873, to the current times. But that was, 5 hours inside the cafeteria could be claustrophobic, not only for the characters, but for the audience also. So we want my screenwriter direct a new film with some of the characters that couldn't appear in this version because they are really interesting.
Well, thank you. If it were 6 hours, we'd still program an entire competition because that's what we like. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is a film by a filmmaker that we consider Dutch, even though clearly she's from Greece, because she was at the Rijksacademie, a visual artist who made a very tactile film about the very nature of what humanity means in regards to how we treat animals and how we look at the world. Let's take a look at Kala Azar. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Yanis Rafa.
Hi, welcome. Could you please explain us, what is your film about, Kala Azar?
It's clearly a fiction film which is trying to combine different layers of existence in one place. At the periphery of a city that we don't know exactly where it is, exactly what time or year we are, so it's kind of timeless. And we follow a couple that collects roadkill and at the same time cremates pets to a crematorium and takes them back, the ashes, to the owners. So partly that's their job and partly they're doing something other, that is the connection they have with the landscape that is revealed to us through the roadkills that we meet and the stray animals.
Loss and mourning and ceremonies around mourning are, I would say, like a recurring theme in your work also as a visual artist. And this is your first feature-length film. In what way was your approach towards this subject, with this in a feature-length film, different than your other work?
Yeah, it's certainly different that actors were invited in the film and in the structure of the film, in the storytelling. There's also my father acting in the film also, yes. So there is some kind of autobiographical relations to the place, to the way animals are perceived and worked in the film, but at the same time actors brought some kind of other structure in scripting. But overall, I think it's an attempt to use all these past works I have been making, which indeed it's about mourning, it's about farewelling, it's about the ritual of burying or kind of relating to other bodies that are different to ours, smaller, fairer, or I mean, animal bodies or dead or living bodies, stray bodies also, and. And I think it's a film that is structured. It creates a world that trying to combine all these short video art pieces I have been doing. Maybe.
You mentioned the actors. Dimitri Lalos is here, sitting in front. There's very little dialogue in the film. It's quite, in that sense. I mean, the soundscape is rich, but the dialogues are quite small. Could you explain or tell us a little bit about that choice?
I suppose there was never a necessity for dialogue in the sense of explaining the story. When dialogue is there, it doesn't explain much of the kind of storytelling of the narrative, but is there as a kind of different way of visualizing something. But the film is more textured, more tactile. It has a obsession with the image, with the visual, with looking away from the story, looking somewhere else, less anthropocentric, but also non-animalistic at the same time, kind of lowering the gaze to something other.
You mentioned looking in a different way and maybe not an anthropocentric perspective. Is that also why you decided to position at times the camera quite low?
Yes, but not in a conscious decision, in a kind of mathematical structure that we created. It came much more naturally of how we would deal with each scene, what the story needed at the moment and where the camera should look at. And of course, there are situations that are slightly improvised in relation to animals, in relation to the landscape, what it offered us. So the camera would kind of react to that.
Thank you very much.
Well, there's something I want to know, because you're creating a landscape and an environment which is almost an anti-film in some regards, because there's not the focus on the action or the explaining dialogues, tactilities, sensory elements are more relevant, and we find ourselves in a place that has post-apocalyptic qualities to it. How did you approach that element, and how relevant was it for this film?
I think it could be one of the main characters of the film, the landscape, this kind of darkness of landscapes. They are in between, kind of in these gray zones of cities that they're expanding, but they're also stuck. They're kind of, there is a certain distraction to it, or hostility, development, but also kind of suffocation. So this in-between place we can all, I think, recognize was really something that always triggers me to go and investigate, also as a starting point in going into the ideas that were developed later in the film. So the landscape, I think, is one of the protagonists that lead us to tell these stories and bring characters and animals, alive or dead, in the same location.
Final question, there's a very special scene which almost is an artwork by itself, as an ode to chicks, bunch of chickens. How are they doing?
How did we do it?
No, how are the chicks doing? The chickens, how are they doing?
Oh, how are they doing? Yes, good,
Yes.
good question. Thank you for asking. Yes, they're not there. Obviously, this particular clutch of chickens is not there anymore, and I think the scene is a requiem played by a band to this particular group of chickens the night before they depart for slaughter. So it's quite clear that they're not here with us anymore. So it's clearly a farewell to beings that they have, that we have kind of predicted and we have decided for their lifespan. And yeah, it's really, the film is about loss and understanding what connects us to the world and to other beings is this kind of mortality we all share.
It's also referencing your earlier work, no?
Yeah.
Because we've seen the band in Requiem for a shipwreck that we also showed here in Rotterdam. So it was quite interesting to see how you brought them back in the end scene.
Yeah, that's something we were saying earlier, that it's a series of requiems, and of course it could be a video art piece, the band playing to the chickens, but I decided not to do it a video art piece, and I kind of use it as the center for me to expand into a feature. So in a way, it was the narrative that was created was in order to be able to host this scene at the end of it, in a sense.
Well, we think it's great cinema. That's why it's in Tiger Competition. Thank you very much. So this is a roundup. These were the 5 films we've shown now. Calazar is premiering tonight, actually. These are the directors. You can ask them questions. Let's get them up on stage, all together. Have a group shot. If there are questions in the audience now, feel free to raise your hands or shout something out. If not, we will start cutting the live stream all together and have a more informal discussion. I hope you guys managed to see each other's films. In closing, I would like to say that some of the elements that we like to show more of as a festival always have what we thought is very present in these films, which comes from a place of originality, authenticity, and a personal motivation to bring to the world either forgotten stories, relevance of historic movements, find out where the border is between reality and fiction, or even look for the meaning of life in a certain way, which is quite an achievement. I hope you have a very good time watching these films. Come back on Tuesday when we do the second press conference with others. For now, if there are questions, now's the moment. There, Ben, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ben from Screen International. Ben from Screen International in the UK. This is for Maria, but also if any of the others want to jump in. Last week in Brazil, a culture minister, a guy called Roberto Alvim, was fired for making a speech that was basically a Nazi speech, saying that Brazilian cinema should be heroic and national. As artists, what is your relationship with national identity in your filmmaking, and what did you think about this comment?
I believe we're talking about Brazil in the film. Brazil is a big country and has a lot of particularities, but we are speaking from some middle class position. The films take a lot of time to do it. So when we started shooting it, we never know that Brazil would get so quickly to where it is now. But I believe it has certain knowledge that already something was going on. This apathy from this class while deciding not to see or discuss the small things that they already see that it's not okay, and like, let's keep pretending and together doing this pact that nothing is happening, so nothing will happen, obviously went badly to Brazil. And actually, from doing the film to the end, then Brazil changes a lot. But I believe it talks about that. And in the end of the movie, I believe I positionate myself about what I think we should do.
Any other questions at this point?
Comment also on?
Sorry? Oh yes, of course. Please.
One of the thing that happened while we were shooting was discovering that many of the people who appears in the film who belong to this corner of Spain who has been kind of abandoned by the capital, and it's where nothing is happening. Some of these places are really depressed. In the film, we were shocked because most of these people who belong to families that were fighting against the dictatorship, nowadays they are starting to have racist and far-right discourses. And the shoot, and then it was like, hey, what's going on? Why is this lovely woman saying these complicated things? And at the same time, the film is so close to the characters that you can understand this mixture of confusion and anger to make them to find guilties because they don't have tools to get out of their place. And the film was shot in November 2018, and in December of 2018 was the first time a far-right party in Spain had representation in the south. And then this far-right party became part of the Congress, and it was the most voted political force in the region. We made the film just 1 year after the shooting. So, and what also we discover, and it's the final part of the film, is that I think that the economic global system maybe realized that doesn't need democracy anymore to work. So I don't think that the main corporations are going to defend or protect democracy anymore.
Jorge, I'm sure you have something to add. Venezuela being a paradise of tranquility.
Well, I come from a place where films no longer get support, where many of them are censored. And to answer your question, I think like comments like the one Bolsonaro made are extremely dangerous. However, they can cut the flowers, but the spring will always come. And as we've seen from countries that are complicated to make films, people make films in all kinds of conditions. So thank you for your question.
I'll just add something because, I mean, we are actually in Brazil right now discussing a lot this team, right? And what I feel like is the difference. I mean, of course, we feel like we'll keep going, and I said that we'll manage and we have to reinvent ourselves. But in Brazil, we have like constructing and discussing policies for how can we work properly doing this, because we're doing art, but we are also working, and the people that work with us is workers, and we need to think about they will be respected as workers too. So I think in Brazil, the worst part, besides they were cutting all the funds and everything, and our president declares himself against culture, which is crazy. And the thing is, we know that we won't be able to keep living with respect and conditions as we were actually conquering before.
Powerful statements. Thank you very much. Let's make sure these flowers keep growing and blossom and will be seen. We'll wrap up the online part of the streaming for now, but we'll remain here and discuss further, because we can discuss for hours on end in a bar and raise our fist for Cinema High. Thank you very much.